Hello, hola, and welcome to the Audacity of Joy podcast, where we answer the central question: what role does joy have in our work to promote justice, transformation, and healing? I'm your host, Jennice Chewlin, public health champion, entrepreneurial activist, affectionately named La Reina of Joy, and CEO of the workplace wellbeing consultancy, Chewlin Group. In this podcast, you'll hear from changemakers, creatives, and leaders who are using joy as a strategy for change, celebration, and challenge. Each episode offers real talk about burnout, recovery, and the courage to choose joy in spaces that often forget it. Listen to spark curiosity, reflection, and action. This isn't about ignoring struggle. It's about daring to imagine differently. It's a movement helping change makers rediscover joy as a tool for well-being, resilience, and healing. Because one thing for sure is that joy helps us hold both pain and the possibility. It builds capacity for empathy, creativity, and courage. The same tools needed in leadership and change making. Listen and subscribe to hear from leaders, explore how joy shows up in their lives, work, and how they lead. Thank you to our sponsor, Chewlin Group, who is on a mission to bring the audacity of joy to transform organizations to become drivers of health and well-being, to build trust, collaboration, and impact. Welcome, everybody, to the Audacity of Joy podcast. I am so excited for another episode where I get to bring to you a change maker in real life who is using joy as a strategy for change, challenge, and celebration. Today, I am bringing with you Grace out of New Hampshire, and we're going to have a conversation around that theme and answering the question: is there room for joy in our work? So welcome, Grace, to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Grace, I thought we could start off by having you share a little bit about the work that you're involved in, just to get our audience familiar with your work and your amazing passion.
Thank you. Yeah. The current work that I do is really focused on community organizing, advocacy, and activism. Most people who know me within my community and political work know me as an immigrant rights activist and an immigrant rights advocate. I myself am an immigrant. And I came to the United States when I was 2. I lived as an undocumented person for a very long time. And so my identity and my experience as an immigrant really shaped so much of my life. And so I had the great opportunity of being able to do work that really focused on transforming our immigration system to make it more equitable, more humane, more just for people like me and unlike me who have gone through it, who have experienced, unfortunately, the worst of it. But now in my current role with the New Hampshire Center for Justice and Equity, my work has expanded. So it still includes immigrant rights, but now it also includes increasing equity in other systems. And that includes our early childhood education system, our juvenile justice system, education system, health system, and so on. And so I have the privilege of being able to do a variety of different things related to that work. I get to facilitate, I get to speak, I get to meet people, I get to organize events, I get to work in coalition and in collaboration with a number of different partners from across the state and the region on a number of different initiatives. And I'm really proud to be able to use my voice, to use my experience, to use my perspective in order to really try to move our systems in ways that enable them to actually serve, support, and protect all people, not just those who have privileged identities, not just those who are wealthy, not just those who are white, but recognizing that we have systems of inequality and systems of inequities that do need to be changed. And so I get to play one small part of that. So yeah, that's some of the work that I do lately.
Well, we're so many folks are excited that you're there at New Hampshire Center for Justice and Equity to expand your work that you do so well in and are so passionate about.
Thank
Was
you.
thinking that we could also help our audience because every guest I have shares their experience with using joy in their work, but it's nice to
Mhm.
hear your own personal definition of what joy means to you because we know it's different for everyone.
Yeah, I think honestly, in many ways, more ways than one, joy really at its heart is the sort of the calibration towards pleasure. And so before I was an activist and an advocate, and I still consider myself to be this. I was an artist and I still am an artist. Art was my first passion. I was drawing and scribbling on any surface I could get my hands on, it was just a little thing. I've had the opportunity to perform on stage. I've had the opportunity to sing, to dance, to act, to do all sorts of things, to make beautiful paintings, to take photographs. And so for me, all of that is wrapped into one. And that sort of creative expression that has been a part of my life since I came into this world and still remains a part of my life, even if it's not necessarily my career is really how I think about joy and both in that it's joy and pleasure. They're all variations, right? They express themselves in all these diverse ways. And I think that many times because we live in such a challenging world, right? There's a lot of pain in our world, there's a lot of difficulties that we all experience in our lives. Oftentimes our focus, and it makes sense because our brains are kind of wired towards this, to notice patterns and to protect us from hurt and pain. But we do sort of have sometimes sort of a biased tendency towards focusing on the negative. And I think joy and pleasure reminds us that there is more to life, that it is also our birthright to experience pleasure as much as it is to that we must also experience the opposite of that in pain. And so for me, the pursuit of pleasure is what brings me joy, and that can be in through art. It can be through the time I am blessed to spend with my loved ones. It's in the simplicity of spending a day outside, taking a walk, being able to feel the sun on my face, and just recognizing that there's so much beauty in the world, both the beauty that was here before we came into the world and that will remain here even long after we're gone, but also the beauty that we get to cultivate with each other and within our own relationships, and especially with our relationship with ourselves, and recognizing that again, because we're hardwired for pleasure, we're hardwired for joy. It is simply a matter of how we want to express that. And so I have had the great pleasure and the great opportunity to be able to explore many different ways to express my joy and my pleasure, and that is such a gift, honestly. I guess I can't say it any better than that.
That is very, very I find that the way you explained it offers so many entry points for our listeners that joy isn't one thing, in fact, but it's these opportunities that have us be creative. It's admiring nature outside, as you're saying. And I love how you're expressing it before you were, one of your identities you said before I was an advocate, I was and still am creative. And I want to explore this a little bit with you because especially folks who are doing change making work, who are the good troublemakers, as when we're so into our work of changing, closing the gaps of inequities and working day after day with the onslaught of changes and uncertainty, it can be challenging to remember what we did before we did the work, before we started engaging in advocacy and helping others. I'm wondering, Grace, if you could help explain how you continue to dance between those identities that you shared with us and how you remember to create rituals around your joy and your what you see as pleasure. How do you maintain or keep that at the forefront? And when do you notice when it's starting to slip away?
Well, that's such a good question. So I think the ways that I notice that it starts to slip away is when it becomes so when I realize that, like, there's a sense of depletion, right? There's a sense of fatigue that no long night's sleep can really make go away. There's a sense of tiredness in that feels honestly spirit deep. It feels like it goes beyond the physical and it's really settling into my spirit and in my heart. And I think that when I start to realize that the world seems flat and monochromatic and I don't find myself smiling and smiling and holding noticing small moments in my life that typically will bring a smile to my face, that typically I have will bring me to laughter. When just life starts to feel very sort of flat and one dimensional. And so, the ways that I find that I cultivate joy and I cultivate rituals of pleasure is really being intentional. And I always tell my friends and my loved ones that I always try to find ways to romanticize my life. So it could be as simple as the fact that I'll drink water in a crystal goblet that I thrifted at my local consignment shop. It would be as simple as the fact that I love flowers and I find types of ways to display flowers in my home. My home is a really important place for me, and as I know it is for so many people, because it is my sanctuary, my oasis away from the world. And so I'm very intentional about cultivating a space that not only reflects me, and the things that bring me pleasure and the things that, bring a smile to my face and lightness to my heart. So in cultivating a home that brings me pleasure and reflects me, I wanted to also feed all of my senses, right? So visually, auditorily, I wanted to feed my sense of smell and my sense of taste. And I want to be able to feel it in the texture. So in the fabrics that I use, the photos and the pictures that I put up, the books that I curate and I bring into my home and I add to my library, the games that I display, the small knickknacks and rocks and little things that I collect over my time and my days and my weeks and my months that just bring a sense of lightness and peace to my days and to my weeks. And so I take those things in and I find ways of adding beauty and whimsy to my life because I think as adults, as we get older, a lot of that there's so many responsibilities that we have. We have work, we have to pay taxes, we have to raise children, we have to care for our elders. We have to do all sorts of things. And oftentimes we're always giving, giving, giving to others. And we forget that, we must still feed our imagination. We must still feed our hearts. We must still tap into the whimsical and the magical because even though life is very practical and pragmatic, it's also very magical. I mean, you just go outside and you look at the sun and you just imagine that there is this star that is suspended in the heavens that brings light and brings warmth and enables life, right? And so I find that small rituals are really important because sometimes it can be very overwhelming to try to be like, oh, I'm going to do this thing in this big way and I'm going to try to be really, really strict about it. But if I can include it in small ways throughout my day, then it builds up, right? And I have this reserve of beauty and pleasure that I can always be tapping into, and that no matter what I'm doing, even if I'm busy and I'm running around, I can take that one moment to inhale that luscious candle scent that I happen to have by my bed. I can enjoy the beautiful beaded bird that I bought in Mexico City some years ago that's hanging in my car window. I can enjoy the rotation of photos of my loved ones that move through my phone. So I think it's really important to include rituals of joy in small ways throughout your day, your weeks, your months, so that it just feels like it just is incorporated, is naturally a part of your life as opposed to this sort of separate, big, overwhelming thing that you have to do that feels like it's not truly connected to your day to day. So that's how I try to do it. And it's never a perfect science, right? Because it's not meant to be. We're human beings and things change and demands increase and decrease and priorities shift. But I think that when I cultivate it and I cultivate pleasure and beauty in that way, it doesn't matter where I am or what is happening. I can always find moments to not only enjoy what I've already included in my life, but also be reminded that I can continue to collect those rocks and take those pictures and, enjoy that, enjoy that fabric or that texture and add it to my life in small and in big ways.
Well, first of all, let's drop the mic on what you said, which is how important it is to romanticize your life. I remember the first time I heard you share that in the Joy's Resistance program. And I think we all
Mhm.
just took away and said, well, there you go. That is that is the formula to integrate joy into your everyday is one, romanticize your life. And two, what you're saying is invite all your senses. It doesn't have to be one dimensional, which is your red flag for that. Hey, it's slipping away. But also, when you do invite it, make sure you're incorporating all of your senses. And I like that because I often will explore my sense of inviting joy into my life through seasons. The season of life
Mhm.
that I'm in, when I have little kids, when my kids are real little, I find that it's easy for me to step into the wonder of the world. And as they grow older, to your point, we sort of like sanitize that imagination and that process of having wonder. So one way that I've been inviting it more is through the seasons of weather, right? Like my joy in winter looks very different than summer. And you're reminding me through your five senses to invite it in is like how I do use it. I don't even know I'm using my five senses, but now I'm going to be more conscious because of like eat hotter food, not just in temperature, but more
Mhm.
spicy food in the winter. When there's a sun that shines through my window in my room and it casts a shadow on my bed of the shades a certain way, that's my invitation to run to my bed and just jump and flop on my bed like you see in commercials of someone being in a hotel room and they just kind of drop on their
Mm.
bed. That 40 seconds is like my invitation because I know the sun isn't going to shine that long in this winter season. And so it's just interesting how we can go back to basics and just go back to our five senses. And that's your on ramp to an invitation to joy for the day.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I love that you said that about, when there are these moments that are temporary and you have the opportunity to enjoy them and be on the bed with the sun shining on your face and your body. Like that's exactly it, right? It's and I think that in cultivating that sense of that intentionality and that alignment towards, seeking that which gives you pleasure in small and big ways. I think what we do is we sort of recalibrate ourselves, right? And then it starts to, because again, we're wired for this. So then it becomes very sort of natural feeling. And it reminds me of the fact that I have these little glass doorknobs or pull knobs that are for like drawers and stuff. And they're beautiful. They're these faceted cut crystal glass knobs. And whenever the light shines through, it creates prisms of light all over the room. And so instead of using them as an actual drawer pull, I actually just have them on my windowsill so that as the light comes through, as it passes across my apartment and it comes through the window, these prisms of rainbows get thrown across the room in different places and different spots. And there's no reason for it other than it's just pretty. It's just beautiful to see and it makes me happy. And I love being able to look over and see one of my cats just happening to be in that prism of light and just the visual sense of that, the way that it feeds my spirit and the way that those sorts of small things can feed our souls and our spirits is not nothing, because just as we need to nourish our bodies with, nutrient rich foods and water and exercise, we also do need to feed our spirits with beauty and with pleasure. And because when we don't, I mean, we truly starve and we suffer for it. And then we're not as full as we can be. We're not as, if we're going to use productivity as a measuring point, we cannot be as productive as we can be because we're not pouring from a full cup. We are not operating from a full tank. And so it is so important to see that intentional pursuit as just as critical and just as necessary as eating a good solid meal, getting your veggies in and getting your water intake for the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the resounding theme I'm hearing from you is like going back to basics and, from nourishing ourselves, not the with food, with water, and also the beauty, the simple beauty, using our five senses. And I really appreciate that because it's practical. To your point, I think there's this misconception with joy that it's happiness. And because of that, I think people get trapped into thinking that joy has to be this grand, luxurious thing that you were talking about.
Mm.
We have to save up for it or we have to wait until XYZ is done. But what I'm hearing from you is that all of these decisions that you're making around getting more beauty and pleasure into your day comes from within. You're making a choice about setting your home up for that, and then that recalibrates you to then go and do your work in the community, in your personal life, building relationship with friends and people you love. How do you perceive the role of all of these practical and simple ways to invite joy? Do you think that that fits in? And is there room for all of that, even in this work in pursuit of justice,
Mm.
healing, and transformation?
Yeah, no, yeah, I really like that question. And I'd say in short, yes, absolutely. Because if we don't have joy and pleasure and contentment and beauty, all of those things that make us feel good and help us help each other feel good, then what are we really fighting for, right? What is the world that we're truly fighting for, that we're advocating for, that people have sacrificed their lives for? And I think one of my favorite authors is Adrienne Marie Brown, and she wrote a book called Pleasure Activism, and it's a book that reminds those of us who are working as advocates, as activists, that the very reasons that we are fighting for a better world is so that we have a better world where we are allowed to spend time doing the things that we love, that we have the our basic needs met in such a way that we're not fighting for survival and we're not sacrificing every bit of energy and attention just to be able to meet our basic needs, but that we are truly embodying that which we call ourselves, right? We're human beings. There's the beingness, the simple existing aspect of us as creatures living on this planet who happen to have the brains that we have and the ability to transmit what we see and to learn and to transmit that to others and to grow these great societies and create these amazing technologies. But at the heart of what makes us amazing as the animals and the living beings that we are is the simple fact that we exist and the very matter of that each of us has some sort of gift, whether it's the gift of music or it's the gift of art or it's the gift of writing or the gift of making things with our hands and building things. Like we all have gifts that we bring into this world. And yet because our systems are the way that they are, many of us spend all of that energy and that would have gone to our creative expression towards ensuring our survival and the survival of the people that we love and the people that we are responsible for. And we have to do that while working, in many ways at a deficit, right? We don't all have the same starting point. We don't all get the same access to resources in order to be able to have those basic needs met. And so it is our birthright to simply be and to share our beingness with others. And so I do think that it is incredibly critical, actually. Joy and pleasure and beauty and love are all critical parts of, actually, more than just a part. They are the mountains through which we are aiming to reach the top of. Because when we have that kind of world, when we have the means to be able to fully live and express ourselves and to for others to fully live and express ourselves. I mean, just look what we're able to accomplish and create even within our systems of oppression, right? And imagine what we could create and accomplish without those systems, without that oppression, without those inequalities. I mean, just imagine. I mean, another one of my favorite authors is Octavia Butler, and her Parable of the Talents, Parable of the Sower series is one of my favorite books because she talks about, the main character in that story talks about the fact that it is human beings, it is our legacy to reach the stars. And in many ways, yes, of course, we've had astronauts who've walked the moon, we've had Mars probes, we've been able to break away from the bounds of our planet, but we've never explored beyond our own planetary system, right? And the fact is that we are one small, tiny, tiny planet in one small, not that large galaxy in a unbelievably expansive universe. God knows if there's other life. God knows. I mean, the likelihood is pretty high because it can't just be us, right? In this big, big, big expanse. And so we must fight for those things because that is our legacy. That is what we're meant to do. It's much easier and I think much more sustainable just from a human psychology point of view to fight for love than it is to fight out of fear. Fear and hate are very potent emotions, right? They can motivate people to do all sorts of really terrible things, but love can motivate people to do absolutely incredible, amazing things. Pleasure makes people, you know, you can go crazy for the pursuit of pleasure just to be able to feel that sensation just one more time. And when we do that as a collective effort, right? Because I really want to emphasize it's not just about the sort of individualistic, selfish pursuit towards sort of whatever gets your rock going. It's really about, yes, the individual is important, but so is the collective because as unique as we each individually are, nothing that we experience is unique to us as an individual, right? We all experience joy, love, lust, hate, fear, name the emotion, anger, anxiety, sadness, grief, all of that. And I think because again, our lives are so temporal, we are not guaranteed anything. We have no idea how much time we will have on this earth. And we have no idea how much time our loved ones are guaranteed on this earth. And so it is incumbent on us to not waste our lives. It is important for us not to waste what life we have. And the pursuit of joy and pleasure is at the very heart of why we fight for justice, so that every human being, regardless of where they come from, regardless of who they are, regardless of where they're born, regardless of what they look like, who they love, what they wear, all of us have equal access to that which makes us the very human beings we call ourselves to be.
I just had to marinate on that. I'm sure our listeners have to press pause before they text a friend and say, wait a minute, let me share something with you today. Because you're cracking open and bringing light into work that is always hard and full of these emotions, and you're cracking it open to say it's at the heart. Wait, let's not get confused that at the heart of justice is love and joy and pleasure, because everyone deserves to experience life than just surviving. And that is a powerful reminder that this podcast is an invitation for all listeners to hear those cracks of light that you just shared, to have us marinate a little bit longer around our own relationship with beauty. And I want to highlight the importance of collective care and collective joy. You called it out, and it's not, there's a role and a place for individual, as you know what feels good for you. And then there's the human experience that we all need each other. And to do this hard work together in pursuit of justice and equity, at the heart of it is togetherness. And so why not bring that in with joy and love. And I'm reading a book by Ross Gay called Inciting Joy. And he talks about how our world has changed so much. And each time we make a change, what's happening is that it's chipping away at our togetherness, our remembrance that we rely on each other. None of this work can get done with one person doing it. And so that's my interpretation of what I've read so far. And one piece from it also highlights how he says even like the most rigid person, even the person who like follows the rule to the T, think of that, think of that person. All of us, we all have a rubric of care that needs air and light. And I believe that when we get together and we are fighting in the same cause and we are in pursuit of closing a gap in pursuit of justice, what we're doing is providing that air and light for each other so that we can rely on each other and keep moving forward. Even if we won't see our own efforts help us with the result of what we're fighting for, if that makes sense. We don't know when the end of our fight is going to be, and it may not be in our lifetime. So what is the fuel? And I love how Ross Gay, in his book, he talks about that, what the fuel is, and reminds us we need each other.
Absolutely. I always am reminded of the fact that it is because of the sacrifices of those who came before me that I was able to go to college and finish college, that I was able to, even as, as a woman, to be able to buy my own home and have my own money, like very simple things like that, where it wasn't that long ago, where some of the privileges we take for granted now were not available to us, whether it's because of our gender, because of our race, because of our country of origin, whatever the case may be, because of our socioeconomic status or orientation, our gender or sexual orientation, all of those things. And so there is still so much to be done, so much to be done. But what we're doing now, what we're seeding now, some of it we will experience, but absolutely, much of it we likely will not. But we are the recipients of that work that came before us. And I think it's so important to call out the fact that, especially within our capitalist societies, there is this lie that we're told that joy and self-care are really about whatever you can purchase, right? And don't get me wrong, as long as we have capitalism and you need money, having enough money will always solve a whole wealth of problems. Just that alone, right? But the reality is that true joy, community care, love, pleasure, all of that doesn't need to be paid for by a credit card. It doesn't need to be certainly money helps. Your friend is in need. You can help them mutual aid. Our communities are in need. We help with, again, mutual aid, solidarity networks, all of that. All of those are important, but recognizing that, yes, absolutely, that collective care is truly at the heart of that which will truly liberate us, right? Liberation and love are tied together inextricably, and none of those have a price tag on it. None of those require you to it goes beyond just a bubble bath and getting your nails done. Although, granted, I do love me a good bubble bath and getting my nails done, but that's not liberatory. And when we're talking about liberatory and we're talking about that collective care, and we are included in that care, I think that's something that people often forget about, is that taking care of the individual also allows us to take care of the collective, but they must never be separated from one another, right? And hand in hand, they're parallel and overlapping and interlocking with each other. And so that we must care for us as individuals in order to care for each other. We must care for each other in order to care for us as individuals. And so I completely agree with that. And I think that remembering that it goes beyond self care, right? It goes beyond what sort of is marketed to us as as joy, that, oh, just buy the new luxury vehicle and you will be joyful. But that's what makes marketing so potent, is that it taps into that very real human experience, that very real human emotion, which tells us that we're not just buying and purchasing a product, right? We're purchasing a sense of ourselves. We're purchasing healing. We're purchasing a possibility, a future. But when we kind of strip it down and we recognize that when all of the items are gone, when all of the sort of the accoutrement, the outer shells are no longer available to us, all we have is each other. And what makes our movement work so potent, our liberation, our work so incredibly powerful, our activism and our advocacy so sustainable, is the fact that we show up for each other. It's the fact that when we show up, we see people that we love. We are able to be in collective space with one another, fighting on the same side, fighting for the same thing, holding one another in our grief, holding one another in our pain, and to be held and seen and heard are integral for us as human beings because of the interdependence that we have for one another. Without it, I mean, when we don't hold our babies, when we feed them, change them, but we do not hold them and are present with them, they die. And it is the same for adults. We still need that. That is what powers our movement. That is what powers our work. And so we need all of that together to truly get where we're trying to go.
Grace, this has been such a potent conversation, I will say, because you know, what I'm hearing is that joy is a buffer and that it helps us recalibrate ourselves. And it's a bridge to the imagination to get this work done. It's a bridge to help us connect with others, to bring folks in to the work so we can get it done. So we can imagine together a world where it's not just about meeting our basic needs.
But it's even more than just bringing people in. It's about keeping us together, right? And it's about creating that very world, even in small pockets, even when it's just when we come together, weekly or biweekly or monthly, but then we sustain that. We create these ties that bind us together, that sustain us through crisis, because it's not just about showing up when everything is wrong, but it's also showing up and seeing one another, celebrating with each other, being present and spending time together. And all of that truly sustains us for the long term.
Yes. Grace, thank you so much for being on the podcast to help us navigate that question as is there room for joy in our pursuit of justice, transformation, and healing? I think you did a wonderful job of painting a picture
Thank
of what you
you.
do personally and why it's important to keep this central. I just want to, give you more flowers for the way you're able to articulate all of your
Thank
thoughts and
you.
everything that you absorb in your life and how you're able to bring it forward in a way that helps us better understand the world and the work that we're in change making. So thank you for all that you do and thank you for being a guest.
Thank you so much, Denise. Honestly, thank you for creating this space, both in the workshop series that I had such a pleasure being a part of, especially at the time that I joined. That was actually a really painful and grief-stricken period of time for me, to have that one space where I was with others, or being very intentional about joy wasn't something I had in anywhere else in my life. So thank you for creating that space. Thank you for creating this podcast. I think it's such a important offering and a really critical reminder for all of us that we must be including this into our lives if we are to make it. And I think we all want to make it. We want each other to make it. And so you are such a gift to all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you so much. What a beautiful reminder from Grace that joy is a luxury free necessity. I hope this episode encourages you to look for those small creative invitations and intentions to romanticize your own life today. Whether that's through a sensory ritual, lighting a candle, an incense, making delicious food, or a moment of intentional wonder, stepping outside into nature, looking through a window. And remember, your joy is a spark, but when we share it, it becomes the fire that sustains our movement and our togetherness. If this conversation resonated with you, please share it with someone in your collective who might need a little more fuel today. Until next time, Keep claiming your right to heal, transform, and advance justice.